The public saw Kamikaze Chris as an intimidating street racer who showed no fear. Street racing is about more than simply speed, but his determination to win appeared unbreakable. Even at their finest, players can't escape the clutches of fate in this high-stakes game. A tragic event turned Chris's world upside down in an instant, just when he appeared to be solidifying his legacy. So, what transpired in reality? After this, what's his next move? The tragic tale of Kamikaze Chris and how it altered his life is told here. Street Outlaws Chris, the man behind the intimidating flat black El Camino, isn't exactly someone you'd expect to be a street racing superstar. He was expected to fail miserably, according to everyone. However, expectations are consistently shattered by him. And the thing is, it was never meant to be a part of a larger scheme. He did what he wanted to accomplish since life led him down this path. Because Chris has always known what it's like to be the underdog. Chris came from humble beginnings, growing up in a working-class family in an impoverished area of Oklahoma City. He said it best, his family wasn't only suffering, they were completely bankrupt. That type of brokenness, where garments passed down from generation to generation weren't simply used, rather than the kind where money was limited. They had seen better days, were thin and soiled. He was responsible for figuring out what he desired beyond the fundamentals. And racing, not automobiles, was the only thing worth pursuing for Chris. Not first, anyhow. If you ask Chris, he'll gladly tell you that dirt bikes were his first ride. He may or may not be an auto enthusiast. He's an avid racer. Anything with wheels will be raced by him. Almost anything you can imagine, a motocross bike, a grocery cart, or even a lawnmower, would likely catch his eye. He began riding a motorcycle at the tender age of 3 and never looked back. He kept his bike going by performing odd jobs while other kids his age played at the park. He would line up at the starting gate twice a week to race, and he would do so against riders who were almost twice his age. He seemed unfazed by that, though. He was exceptional because of his work ethic, passion for speed, and will to win. Does it include that kind of work ethic? His father was a successful drag boat racer who passed it on to him with a single rule. You damage it, you restore it. That hit home for Chris. He did whatever he could to get money for his next voyage, including mowing lawns, cutting trees, and pumping petrol. Every step up, from a BMX to a dirt bike, was something he had to work for. There was no stopping him once he experienced actual competition. He wasn't only racing at that moment. He was also assisting others in becoming faster, particularly in their vehicles. When Justin Big Chief Shearer and Kamikaze first crossed paths in high school, it was as if two pieces of a jigsaw clicked into place. They were inseparable rivals who never shied away from a challenge, both were autonauts. Actually, Big Chief's now iconic nickname was originally bestowed to him by Kamikaze. But speed wasn't the only factor that cemented their friendship. It was crafted during the late hours of the night in the garage. The man who spoke and drove at a breakneck pace wasn't the only one who was Kamikaze. Day after night, he was the only one in the driveway working on the Crow, Big Chief's 1972 Pontiac Le Mans. It was more than a vehicle to them. Their friendship was built upon it. Using their own hands, they pieced together the machine, fixing it one night at a time. As a result of such practical training, Kamikaze struck out on his own. A Chevrolet Love with a tiny block was the first vehicle he acquired. Afterwards, an A-body Chevelle and a Blazer, both of which had small blocks, arrived. Something was off with the Chevelle, though. A 71 wrapped with a bright emerald green paint job that looked like it belonged on a baseboat. Although unattractive, it was quick and had attitude. The action never stops, as automobiles come and go while the drivers race at high speeds across the streets. The core group of OKC racers that Kamikaze stuck close to weren't there to cruise, they were there to dominate. There were a lot of dudes that came only to hang around and display their vehicles. While most people take racing for granted, Kamikaze, Big Chief, Dave Comstock, and their crew took it very seriously. The manner in which Kamikaze drove was indicative of his commitment. In order to win, he did everything it took, including pushing the automobile down the road. Though methodical and not careless, he exerted more effort than most, walking a tightrope between order and anarchy at all times. Therein lies the origin of the moniker Kamikaze. He could make the most impossible things appear easy. Driving came naturally to him. While some sought solace in alcohol or diversions, Kamikaze discovered his serenity as he raced towards catastrophe at full speed. He was most successful there. The exhilaration, the thrill, the intense adrenaline of knowing he was taking his automobile and himself to the maximum. To him, that was the essence of vitality. Not long after that, people started taking notice of him. In Season 3 of Street Outlaws, he co-starred with Big Chief and brought the same raw, no-holds-barred fire to the screen. As a result of the broadcast, drag racing gained national attention, and Kamikaze Chris rose to prominence as a national celebrity. Along with it, he became the rightful owner of maybe the game's most renowned El Camino. This El Camino really belonged to Chris's boyhood friend Tyler Flip pretty before Chris ever laid eyes on it. Because it was a Frankenstein creation made from scraps from friends' automobiles whenever they got new ones, everyone referred to it as the Slut. Despite this, it managed to become well known. In the pilot episode of Street Outlaws, the vehicle was the talk of the town as soon as Flip pulled in. It was very loud and annoying. The mythology was further cemented by the tales surrounding the construction of the zoomy headers, which sent nitrous fireballs shooting out of the fenders. Allegedly, a pool's worth of Bondo, duct tape, silicone, and JB Weld were used to fix it up. To make matters worse, the law was already stinging when Flip arrived to claim his prizes. Despite its ugliness, the harlot moved quickly. Upon Flip's passing, his lifelong companion Justin Big Chief Shearer was of the firm belief that the automobile belonged to Chris. Without hesitation or second thoughts. For more than a year, the vehicle sat under a tarp, collecting dust, hoping that it would find new life in the hands of the right people. Plus, the engine didn't merely start, it roared when Chris eventually turned the key, seemingly anticipating his arrival the whole time. There was no way that kind of vehicle would emerge from retirement without a fuss. One rear brake stopped up and caught fire on its first serious drive. And it was only the beginning. Eventually, had damaged it to the point that it required complete reconstruction. At that point, he made a deal to swap in a friend's 582 engine that had already been constructed. It made him unhappy. It was Chris's tradition to construct his own engines. It seemed unethical to steal someone else's work. It seems his gut was correct. Things went downhill for that 582. 13 complete rebuilds in the course of a single season. Operating a squad of humorous race cars was a lot like it. Rebuild, race, demolish, rebuild, repeat. It would have broken most people, but that's the price you pay for speed. The constant pain had finally gotten to Chris. Now was the moment to proceed. Thus, he dialed the number. He put his life savings into a partnership with Fast Times Motorworks' Graham Jones to create something substantial. 6-32 made entirely of aluminum, with 4-stage nitrous oxide. Along with it, he and his friend Les converted a rear half of a chassis at their garage. So, what's the point? No-brainer. Shine once more on OKC's top 10 list. He returned to the fray in the summer of 2017, winning races and leaving no stone unturned. Still, I felt like something was off. He was determined not to settle because the automobile wasn't performing as he desired. There was a combination of new and used components in the drivetrain, but they were all geared toward one goal: speed. The engine was built by Arizona's Kincaid Racing Engines, with the help of Wasico's rotating assembly and the valve train provided by Crorin Pack. They made the transition to EFI, utilizing components from fuel injector development and a Haltech EFI system that controlled the injection. The El Camino's 6-stage nitrous system was likewise controlled by the identical Haltech configuration. So why end it at 4? Maintaining traction was an uphill struggle with all that power. It was pointless to have horsepower if the vehicle wasn't properly adjusted. Chris and Les installed a new chromoly tube front end that was custom-made by AutoFab Racecars in Maryland after realizing that the original design was limiting its performance. The installation took place in the garage. The radiator was also plucked in an effort to save weight. The engine was now cooled using ice water pumped from a rear tank rather of the old method. With QA1 adjustable coilovers and pack springs at each corner, the suspension was fine-tuned to provide the ideal combination of control and aggressiveness. The original 4-link configuration remained in place as power was sent directly to a Moser 9-inch rear end through a Powerglide gearbox. The G-body spirit was still there, nevertheless, in spite of all the contemporary conveniences. Chris preferred it that way, a little wild and unexpected. Despite all the improvements, there were certain aspects that could not be altered. Chris noted that the El Camino's drive shaft was 62.5 inches in length, and that the factory wheelbase was a long 117 inches. Definitely not what a racing vehicle needs. Since the cab is situated like a truck but is officially a car, it was not possible to move everything back to achieve a more even distribution of weight. It landed on the numbers 2-9-3-5x0. As firmly as they could, 5 Hoosier slicks held the track. To add to the enjoyment, though, each pass remained an adventure in and of itself. Christopher was okay so long as he didn't catch fire. For Chris, racing is more than a way to spend a weekend. It's an attitude. Every ding, bolt, and late night spent in the garage reveals a sacrificial narrative. That vehicle is more than a mere tool. Painted knuckles, lost nights of sleep, and every spare dime he could find went into its construction. At times, even the ones he was unable to. During the day, he operates a little HVAC company. The nighttime hours find him in the garage, where he cleans the Lexan windows, inspects the spark plugs, adjusts the tires, and checks the brakes twice. He takes every precaution since he cannot afford to just pour money into problems. He is not meant to be racing against the big names since he is a working class guy, he is self-funded, and he constructed his vehicle in his garage. But he does it nevertheless. Race expenses have driven him to the brink of insanity on many occasions. Participating in this very program has left him penniless. On the other hand, the underdog moniker isn't an act. It's the way things are. He'll be the first to admit that he's proud and obstinate. To construct, race, and triumph with an El Camino, that is precisely what is required. Obviously, he isn't the only one. Haltech, Speedmaster, and Wolf Aircraft Products are just a few of the firms that sponsor outstanding racers like him and keep him in the race. However, when all else fails, this automobile exemplifies the power of pride, passion, and dogged persistence. In addition, Chris will convince you that this level of racing is within your reach if you believe differently. His kind of vehicle could be constructed by anyone ready to pour their soul, sweat, and cash into the project. Now, the key distinction is this. Before doing anything this extreme, most individuals think twice. It was never Chris. To him, it's a zero-sum game. A constant throughout. For a long time, he fought against that aspect of his personality. But he's finally warmed up to it. Neither is acceptable. It's up to him whether he succeeds or fails miserably. And if you're familiar with racing at all, you're aware it's precisely the frame of mind that yields victory. The vehicle that had given him so much success was also going to drive him directly into tragedy, but he had no idea. You have to understand that racing on city streets has never been an easy or safe pastime. It is still one of the most thrilling, though, for those whose lives revolve on speed. The adrenaline, the sheer force of high-performance machines, the nerves at the starting line, and the importance of making split-second choices that can determine success or failure are all familiar to fans of Street Outlaws and its spin-offs. Accidents happen in every sport. It never ceases to amaze me how a perfectly tuned race vehicle can shift from being at its top performance to a mangled mess in the blink of an eye. Chris Kamikaze knows this better than most. As well as his illustrious 1981 Chevrolet El Camino. While filming Street Outlaws in July 2020, Kamikaze Chris learned the hard way how merciless street racing can be. The damage was more serious than a ding or scrape. He had completed his El Camino. Almost every part of it, the body, chassis, engine, and turbochargers, was destroyed. Some components, such as the parachute lever, gearshift, and rear housing, might be salvaged. After the occurrence, Chris posted about it on his Kamikaze Life YouTube channel. The Elco was already behaving badly that day. The sensor for the drive shaft was causing him problems. Despite his lack of enthusiasm for racing, he couldn't refuse another driver's challenge. After just one race, his cherished El Camino had turned into a hulking wreck. Elco was his most treasured possession, he had a deep emotional connection to it, and losing it was devastating, regardless of the amount of money or time he had invested in its construction. Witnessing its devastation hit me like a ton of bricks. A new chapter has begun. The one thing you can count on from Kamikaze Chris, though, is his unwavering determination. His career in racing did not come to a halt due to this accident. Well, it was only another exam. He was prepared to tackle it directly, like any true racer would be. In an outrageous move, he planned to make his grand return by selling a collection of El Camino wreckage parts on eBay. And not just any bits either. In front of the cameras from Discovery Channel, this automobile pulled off the passenger side, ripping off the Weld racewheel, Mickey Thompson tire, and TBM brake rotor. Plus, he autographed them, which is always a plus. The popularity of the auction skyrocketed. The bid count skyrocketed beyond 100 and reached an incredible $10,600 with 8 days to go. On the other hand, Chris upped the ante. He had promised to prepare and serve the winning bidder a steak meal if the auction reached $25,000. As he raced about in his costume on Facebook Live, fans were enthralled by the daring move and were quick to accept the challenge. These weren't your average junkyard finds, though. Broken automobile parts usually don't fetch much. They were parts of the annals of motorsports. That meant something to the fans of the Street Outlaws. Chris immediately put the proceeds from the over 100 orders he received in only 1 week into his next project, a speed-oriented C5 Corvette. An old face was on display in this brand new vehicle. The menacing posture, the glossy black paint. The El Camino seemed revitalized, and that was true in many respects. Chris painstakingly rebuilt the engine, transmission, and drivetrain components he recovered from the debris and then installed them into the Corvette. Even though the Elco was destroyed in the fire, its soul was kept alive by Chris. Chris Kamikaze also launched Kamikaze Motorsports after becoming famous on television. A virtual shop selling merchandise and replicas of his legendary El Camino. On top of all that, he has his YouTube channel, Kamikaze Life, where he gives his viewers a look into his daily life and goes on hilarious road trips. Since its launch in 2020, it has rapidly grown, amassing over 70,000 subscribers. However, racing remains central to all of his endeavors, despite these side projects. That's why his sudden disappearance from the Street Outlaws took his followers off guard. No elaborate goodbye, no explanation, just disappeared. As expected, speculation began. Was he let go? Was he let go? Had he finished racing? In July 2023, Chris informed followers on Facebook that he will not be returning for No Prep Kings Season 6. But he didn't go into detail about why he wasn't there, so his followers still have more questions than answers. His continued quiet did little to quell the rumors, causing further speculation on his exit. One thing is clear, though, despite everything that has been said. When it comes to racing, Kamikaze Chris has always been there. Despite competing in no-prep contests all throughout the nation, he remains unrivaled on Oklahoma's streets. His current obsession is his C5 Corvette, a vehicle that demonstrates he will not be slowing down anytime soon. Kamikaze Chris is still a scary presence no matter what happens, continuing forward with resolute resolve. Even while his fans have seen him through thick and thin, one thing has remained constant: his fearlessness in the face of adversity. Whether he's on screen or off, he still has a long way to go.